Okay, another weekly wrap up. I think this is like our fifth one or sixth one. Andres, thanks again for joining me.
Happy to be here, Kaya. Yeah, I think you're right. Maybe fifth or sixth, but we'll keep chugging along.
We will. This week, or should I say this week's DXP report was headlined by an article you wrote and published on dxpreport.com. So why don't we start there? Give me a little breakdown of what it was about, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so the article I wrote was about how digital agencies can build partnerships with headless and DXP vendors. So, particularly over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking a lot about how much the headless space has grown, from headless CMS to mock-based company to headless commerce and everything on this and related to headless, and how that's growing. More companies are looking for these sort of resources. So one of the things I think we might have mentioned it in passing, but one of the things I think we don't talk about enough is the fact that headless is the present and the future, but it can still be complicated even if you know what it is about. Like someone still has to go in and help with that implementation of headless, and then you still need to train your team and stuff like that. So in the short term, there's going to be obviously growing pains and adjustments that need to be made. And I think an important aspect of this is how agencies, like digital agencies, who are usually the ones that handle these sort of implementations, getting your internal staff, if you're an enterprise company, up to speed and helping you figuring out these different platforms, the role that they play in this entire headless revolution, if you will. So reached out to a few agencies and vendors, and luckily Christian Byrne from Ocean, Umar Akhtar from Content Boom, and Tim Schwartz from Magnolia's Partnerships, they got back to me with some information about how partnerships come about between agencies and vendors, and some of the potential things that they need to be aware of. So I think first and foremost, the most important thing is that it starts with the customer. So you go on any sort of headless page, you'll see they have different partners from different regions, whatever that. But it usually starts with a customer reaching out to an agency or even a vendor, but usually the agency, they're deciding on the CMS and they're like, okay, we need someone to help us with this. And from there, the vendor might recommend a potential partner, agency partner like Alvin, or the agency partner, they might work with a number of different CMSs, and they can say, okay, this CMS fits your particular problem and can be what you're looking for. So I think we're figuring out that that's the customers is where it all starts. And then just the fact that having a good cultural fit and communication is going to be important for both these parties, because it's really about partnerships. And there's obviously going to be different growing pains and requirements from everyone in terms of trainings that the agency staff is going to have to go through to get up to speed on the implementation, some of the growing pains and things they go through with that. And I think that kind of highlights how important these partnerships are. And I want to give some more advice to digital agencies on how they can build and improve their partnerships with vendors as well.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your article, and I think you touched on a lot of good points. My takeaways were, you mentioned just now again, like implementation process, right? Enterprise is moving more towards headless API first systems. It's, if you can, when you grasp the concept, it's simple, but you still got to implement it, right? Sometimes you've got to migrate all your content from a monolith, right? The content's got to go into the CMS. The customer data has got to go somewhere else. Things can get quite complex, right? Content migrations by themselves, forget like the migration of other assets and stuff like that, can get super, super complicated. And then you've got to think about maintenance, right? So implementing and launching is one thing. Now you've got to maintain. In a Mac ecosystem, you can imagine, again, you've got headless CMS, you've got a headless commerce platform, you've got an API first analytics and personalization system over there, a DAM here. You've got a lot of stuff working together that needs maintenance, that needs someone to look after that, needs somebody who knows what they're doing to look after that. And there could be potentially a lot of complexity there, So the role of the agency is actually going to grow, right? As we move more and more into this Mac ecosystem. With Mac and composable trends taking off, enterprises want, that's the whole point, right? Enterprises want to have their sort of pick of the bunch. They want to have the best headless CMS for them. They want to have the best email marketing system for them. the best personalization system for them, and they'll build this DXP. That's the whole point, right? And we've got more and more examples of like non-CMS, non-e-commerce platforms, like we mentioned last week with Ninetailed, who are being built and launched and marketed as being integratable with a Mac and the composable ecosystem, right? They're sort of riding this wave of Mac. So, if you're a headless CMS vendor or an e-commerce vendor, headless commerce vendor, you kind of need to see this trend coming, right? You need to see that, okay, there's more and more personalization platforms and search platforms that are buying into this Mac ecosystem thing. This thing is happening. And, you need to know that when you've got these integrations happening, enterprise want to see that you've got infrastructure in place, right? They want to see that, okay, this headless CMS, it's not just telling me technically we can integrate with anything. We've got APIs, as long as API first platforms involved, should be quite straightforward. Technically speaking, that's great. But imagine you've got a headless CMS that says, hey, technically we can integrate with whatever you need, whatever you want, versus a CMS, headless CMS that also says, yes, technically we'll do whatever you want. But by the way, we've actually got these, 79 technology partners already established. We already communication with them. We're already building plugins with them. And those 79 platforms are across 18 different categories of software, right? Content management, personalization, analytics, search, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. Me as an enterprise, I'm looking at that and I'm saying, okay, not only is it technically possible, but these guys have actually worked on partnerships and infrastructure to make it possible for us to go into, a marketplace and say, okay, cool, here's all the partners we can choose from. We can pick and choose from that, and there's some infrastructure in place for us to get ahead, and we don't have to do all the heavy lifting, right? As the enterprise, our team doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting to get these integrations in place. For an agency, it's the same thing, right? They need to see this trend coming, and I think we work with a lot of agencies, and many of them are seeing this trend coming. If you're a Drupal agency or a Sitecore agency or an Adobe agency, these platforms aren't necessarily going away. But look at Drupal and Sitecore specifically. The way these platforms are being used, the way these platforms will be used in the future is going to be very different, right? It's not going to be like a walled garden anymore where a customer is a Sitecore customer. They're only using Sitecore products. It's not going to be that way. They could be based on Sitecore, but they're still going to need that Mac ecosystem, that composable ecosystem they want to build. So again, you as an agency, there's no such, I don't think it's going to be much of a such thing as a Sitecore agency or a Drupal agency, or not a very good one at least, in 3 to 5 years time, because enterprises want to use that as a base, but then expand out and use different systems and microservices, as I just mentioned. So as an agency, you need to see that and say, okay, it's no longer in our best interest or in our customers' best interest to just specify and focus on one platform like this, one suite, right? We need to have sort of expertise that goes beyond that, right? So when a customer comes to us and says, we want to use 9 different platforms to build this DXP, that doesn't come as a complete shock to your team, right? You can actually do that. You've got partnerships in place with the analytics platforms, the CMSs, the commerce platforms. There needs to be a sort of broader, more proactive strategy around building partnerships now, I think. And your article does a great job of explaining why that is, and also like giving them some practical tips on how agencies can actually start being proactive about building partnerships, similarly for vendors. So yeah, my digital pat on the back for a good article, man.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I'd also just want to think where you mentioned that it's actually where you mentioned that an agency might not want to focus on a particular like headless, they might not want to be Drupal focused or Sitecore focused. The thing is, I think they could actually do that, but just because of how the trend is going, where like these ecosystems are expanding, I think if they focus their expertise on one particular CMS platform, that's not necessary. Yeah. Don't say it's more about how they expand throughout the entire Mac universe and ecosystem and whatnot. So
exactly, I wasn't saying that like a Drupal agency should like become like a Drupal and Contentful agency. Yep. It's like, okay, being a Drupal agency is fine, but previously it was like, okay, we're a Drupal agency. That means we've got the core system plus all the plugins and extensions that we need to build whatever we need. But going forward, it's as you said, the Mac ecosystem, the Mac universe is getting broader and broader, and enterprises are going to want to use Salesforce over here and Shopify over there, right? So you need, as a Drupal agency, you need to now get out of the mentality of just dealing with Drupal products and say, okay, we're entering into the Mac phase of web development, and we need to our expertise needs to be a bit more malleable, a bit more fluid, So Yeah, it's interesting times.
Yeah, definitely.
Should we move on to our next topic?
Yeah, sure.
Shopify I just mentioned Shopify. They have acquired Remix.run. It seems like there's undisclosed fee, but it seems like Shopify is bringing in the Remix team here, which is an open source framework, bringing their team to help enhance Shopify Hydrogen. What do we know about this so far, Andres?
Yeah, so Remix, I think, has been one of those newer frameworks, like a full stack React based web framework. Helps build fast, resilient websites. Helps brands increase their performance and scalability when it comes to building websites. So, and this is the quote from the team at Remix. With the Remix team at Shopify, developers building on Shopify will benefit from new tools that they will love. Merchants will see custom storefronts that are faster than ever with an improved Hydrogen product. The open source community will have a strong sponsor and supporter they can trust to enable the framework to accelerate its roadmap, the knowledge that they can bet on the framework for the long run. And that's coming from Shopify, actually. And I think this is kind of in line with other JavaScript frameworks that we've seen in the past. React themselves, likes of Vue and whatnot, get backing from major tech companies. In this case, Shopify, major e-commerce platform, and it usually tends to do pretty well for a lot of these frameworks. They get that financial backing from a behemoth, a tech behemoth, and they get to tap into that sort of ecosystem that those companies have already built up, and it helps them to grow a lot faster.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, again, Shopify is going to benefit from having the Remix team helping enhance Hydrogen, and I'm sure the Remix team is going to learn a bunch from just the sheer scale of Shopify. I'm sure I'll learn a bunch from. Not that Remix is small time. Remix is also big, but obviously Shopify is larger. But yeah, the Remix co-founder Michael Jackson said, "For our part, we'll continue to run the project in the open as we have been doing since 2014. So not so new, but they definitely have sort of come to light a bit more in recent years. When we first released React Router. So it's an undisclosed fee. Remix, it seems they're going to remain free and open source. Like that is a little bit cryptic. Run this project in the open, kind of cryptic. He hasn't really committed there to open source, but it alludes to being free and open source. And so it seems like a win for everybody. Just a great feel good story, I think, for the industry.
Yeah, and I think what I want to, in terms of what it means to the industry, I think we've seen the growth that like approaches like Jamstack have had in recent years. And I think as more frameworks, what we've been talking about again, they start to build these sort of partnerships. It kind of lends to a growing overall community within like web development, headless, mock, web everything. Everything starts to be more connected, and it just broadens the ecosystem.
For sure. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up there. Keep it short and sweet as usual. Andres, thanks again, and we will catch up again next week.
All right.